Hello, everybody. Thank you for taking the time to watch this presentation that should hopefully answer a majority of questions regarding the transition from recreational soccer to the competitive program. If you have questions that are not answered here, please feel free to reach out. We'll be happy to get you the information that you want and or need. Another way to think about today's subject is the concept of a player's development path. Breaking it down to the simplest form possible, we have beginner, intermediate, and advanced. And today's information will be discussing the advanced option. If you take the simplest terminology and you apply them to age groups, beginner programming is any in-house rec team and any rec travel team above the age of U11, and we'll explain that shortly. Intermediate is rec travel at the under 9 and under 10 age groups, as well as the advanced prep program at under 9 and under 10. Advanced prep could potentially fall into the advanced category, and a lot of what we discuss here applies to them as well. However, since they have the same training schedule and play in the same divisions as the rec travel team at this age, we'll categorize them as intermediate for today's purposes. And advanced, otherwise known as competitive soccer, is at the U11 and older age groups. Well, what is competitive soccer? We're going to be answering a lot of these questions through the presentation, but first and foremost, it's fun. It is an opportunity to create lasting friends and lasting memories. It is an opportunity to excel by placing yourself in challenging and learning environments, or as we say, steel sharpens steel. And it's a platform for the players to achieve more. Let's begin with the lasting friends and lasting memories portion of that. The primary driver of any sport is fun. Sure, exercise, competition, social opportunities are present as well. However, we compete and we have fun doing it. And just because we form teams differently and compete doesn't mean that we have less fun. Passion drives commitments, and that's what keeps players playing. And we may not have the end goal of college soccer in mind, but it is a possible outcome. So we look at opportunities beyond our club as a byproduct of what we do, but not the end all be all. We judge our success by players returning to coach, and we've begun to see that. In fact, one of my former players now has a player in the club, which kind of makes me feel old, but we want players to enjoy the game for life. And great friends, ask any of our players, and they'll tell you that they've stayed in touch as they've dispersed around the country. Many of the players from SVFC during the Express years are still present in the community. They're proud of their history, and they stay in touch with each other and still feel connected to the club in some way. And competitive soccer provides opportunities to experience challenge and adventure together, and that bonds players together. Another large difference between competitive soccer and all of our other offerings is the use of professional coaches. And we're very grateful to our volunteers for their time and diligence, but there is a difference between a lived experience and a tailored curriculum. We also have the dedication of a paid professional, the oversight that goes into helping mentor and making sure that we're all on the same page. Most of them grew up playing and share very similar goals to the players. And additionally, soccer is one of the few sports that licenses its coaches. And that's something that we provide our paid professionals is opportunities for continuing education to go get their badges, whether that's through United Soccer Coaches, the United States Soccer Federation, or even UEFA, which is a European licensing organization. So there's a lot of opportunity there, but our paid coaches continuously are trying to hone their crafts. But apart from coaching, you also have the large difference of how teams are formed. And we mentioned earlier that steel sharpens steel, and soccer is inherently fun, but there's always a struggle, and that journey mirrors life. So we begin by basing players based on gender, birth year, and ultimately by skill. And this would be how you have first teams, second teams, third teams, fourth teams, and so on. But players have an opportunity to move up or down over the course of time. No one is pigeonholed as a second teamer for their entire life. And while that takes some getting used to, players still have an opportunity to make friends at every level. But in this next section, we're going to start talking about the timing so that people can begin having discussions and planning out their calendars. We'll be discussing age groups and transitions. We'll be discussing kick-arounds for the AP program and tryouts for the competitive program. And we'll take a bird's eye view of how the number of participants actually impact opportunities, not just in the short term, but in the long term as well. And this could also be considered some of our important dates. This is something we recommend for everyone. It's free, it's fun, and just because a player comes out for an event doesn't commit them to anything. And parents are often surprised at just how not intimidating this is. And we'll insert a link in the description of this video below so that you can find all of the important dates that are coming up. After the various player placement events occur, we begin to form teams. And one popular question is, how many kids are in each team? Well, here we are. At U9, U10, they're going to play 7v7. So for this coming year, those are players born in 2013 and 2012, respectively. The preferred roster sizes are 9 to 10 players. We have a little bit of wiggle room there, but the ideal player pool is 30 players. So that gives us 3 teams, or 40 players, and that gives us 4 teams. And again, we'll explain why that's important shortly. At U11, U12, the teams are going to play 9v9. Those are players born this coming fall in 2011 and 2010. The preferred roster sizes here are 11 to 12 players. Again, we have a little bit of wiggle room here. And the ideal player pool is 36 players for 3 teams or 45 players for 4 teams. And at under 13, this is when players move to 11v11 or the full-sided field. This is kind of when we start to see what the adult game actually looks like. This is players born in 2009 and earlier for this coming fall of 2021. The preferred roster sizes here are 15 to 16 players. Again, there's a little bit of wiggle room based on opportunity, availability, and ability of players. The ideal player pool is 32 players for 2 teams or 48 players for 3 teams. So each player pool is primarily driven by the number of available participants. You might ask why that affects you. So here is how we have to plan and forecast for years to come. If you look at the example on the left, this would be what we would consider a small player pool. If we have 20 kids at under 9, that's 2 teams. 20 kids at under 10, 2 teams. When they get to U11, we need to grow by 4 kids in order to get to 2 teams, and then we'll still be at 2 teams at under 12. But when we get to under 13 and we move to 11v11, we have 16 kids at under 13. We would have to grow additionally by another 6 kids in order to form 2 teams. So what ends up happening is if we have a small player pool, we drop down to 1 team. And if we just have a small age group, or if we have, not enough interested parties, we can absolutely do that. But as you can see, when we're at a single team, the top team by the under 13 age group, with that, we have to consider attrition. Attrition is present across all sports at every age group, which we will discuss in detail in a bit. But a smaller player pool means less kids playing soccer sooner, which ultimately impacts the opportunities for players at the older age groups. Look at what happens in example 2 on the right side. Let's say we have a larger player pool. If we have 40 kids at under 9, that's 4 teams. If we have 40 kids at under 10, 4 teams. That same age group moves to under 11. If there's 39 kids, 3 teams, 39 kids still at under 12. And as they age into their under 13 age group, now we have enough participants to form 2 teams. In the second example, we have more kids playing, and that gives us greater flexibility, greater opportunity to be patient in development, and more opportunities for more kids to play. And as we'll discuss next, those kids are the ones who tend to play soccer longer. So why should we consider competitive soccer? Well, we just kind of touched on player attrition, but we'll talk about it a little later. We'll talk about this player pathways idea, and then we'll also go over some common misconceptions. For some folks, they already know that this is what we want, and that's fine. But for those of you who are considering your options or are considering waiting, this is where we'll begin to talk about the opportunity cost. Player attrition. As I mentioned earlier, player participation declines across every sport as players get older. People tend to gravitate towards what they feel good at or what they feel good doing. Kids, more specifically, gravitate toward what their social circle is doing. And that's why we discuss competitive soccer as lasting friends and lasting memories. Those healthy teams stay together and stay in touch years after they graduate high school. I took some sample numbers for fall 2020, and yes, it was an odd season anyway, but this is a pretty steady trend over the past decade. For under 10 players in CSA Front Range League, which we would consider intermediate, there are 73 teams. In this example here, we are looking at under 9 girls, under 10 girls, and then under 11 girls. But there were 73 teams in the intermediate level at under 10. And then for under 11 teams in the CSA League, which we would now be considered beginner, there isn't really an intermediate option. There are only 16 teams, and you can just kind of watch it decrease. So where do all these players go? Well, they go to the advanced option or competitive soccer offerings for their local club for the most part. And if players follow teams, that's roughly 84% of players. So that last slide serves to show that there are still options for players who choose not to pursue soccer competitively. However, each decision compounds upon the previous decision, as we demonstrated earlier, but let's get on it again. Obviously, we have to have enough players to form a team. Too many isn't optimal for training or for development, but sometimes it's a requirement with future planning in mind. But it isn't possible to form a team without enough players, and that's true across all programs for any sport at any age. So example 1, 44 kids wish to play, and that is absolutely perfect. That's 4 teams of 11. And then at under 13, when they transition to 11v11 on the full field, we can still find a place to play for everyone, maybe 3 teams of 15. Well, I guess 1 of 14, but that gives more players more opportunity to experience success and struggle at the appropriate level for them. In that previous example, we had 22 kids who wished to play, so half the player pool size. At under 11, 9v9, or at U11, excuse me, 9v9, that's 2 teams of 11. That's completely fine. But when we get to under 13, 11v11, we do not have enough qualified players to field 2 teams. At a minimum, we need to grow by 6 players, and those players will most likely have missed 2 years of professional training, most likely to round out a second team. But more than likely, we'll be at 1 team, which means that a minimum of 4 kids won't get a chance to play. So since it impacts opportunities because it becomes increasingly difficult to place players at older ages, maybe we have 2 teams at under 11, under 12. But if they're full, we need an entire new team to create space for new kids who want to enter the program. Once we hit the under 13 age group, if there is only 1 team available, and even if that 1 team is perfectly balanced and every player is able to contribute at the correct contribution level, that means it will be nearly impossible for a player to jump from beginner to advanced within the program. And I won't say never, but it is pretty rare. It's definitely not the norm. And so all of those things kind of tend to tickle people's fear of missing out. But when we start to look at the program itself, people also have some hesitations toward it. And we've done a lot of discussion about why the club wants to see more players choose the advanced option at the earlier stages of their development. But what are some things that we hear from parents in regards to hurdles they see? Well, the first one is time commitments. Another one is specialization. Another one is the extent of travel. It is more expensive. It is not fun. It is mean spirited. And then ultimately, the one that we hear relatively often is my player is not ready. And we're going to explore each one of these individually. And my hope is that at the end, you hear that really competitive soccer is not only not that bad, but it's a great opportunity. And we'll begin with the time commitment. And the first thoughts of folks who haven't been through competitive soccer is that it will take over your life. Yikes. And fortunately, while it is more time, it's not that much more time. And so we can have a peek. A beginner or rec team will train on average 2 times a week and have a game on Saturday. Intermediate or advanced prep is exactly the same as a beginner rec team, and that's at the 9 and 10 age group. An advanced or competitive team will train 3 times a week and have a game on Saturday. Additionally, there are usually 1 to 2 Sundays with matches and 2 to 3 tournaments in a calendar year. So while it is a larger time commitment, it's not as daunting as you might think. However, that time does add up. Even if it weren't for the difference in professional coaching and players weren't grouped by ability or to increase the challenge, a player who trains 2/3 the amount of time should only expect 2/3 the development. And over the course of an entire year or longer, that begins to add up. When you factor in the idea of professional coaching versus volunteer coaching, that time is amplified even further. The next concern that people have with a move to the advanced program is this idea of specialization or choosing only one sport. Well, if your child wants to play multiple sports, we say, great, go for it. What we ask for is increased communication and understanding. Obviously, we hope that your player loves soccer so much that their passion overwhelms everything else, but we understand that happens at different rates for different players. And then we ask to just keep in mind, just like in the difference in programs, if a player is only training 2/3 of the time, they should expect 2/3 of the progress. But every player is different, and some players may not be impacted at all. So we not only value multi-sport athletes, but we encourage it, especially in the off seasons, the winter, the summer. In the off season, we utilize rest as a weapon. We want kids to not only love soccer, but avoid burnout. Convenience is a primary theme when it comes to time management, and nobody enjoys traveling all over for something they aren't entirely sure about. So let's look at the difference between the programs. For recreational soccer, all games are held at Sandstone Ranch or Stephen Day, but they are somewhere within the Longmont proper area. For competitive soccer, 50% of games are held at Sandstone Ranch. And the other half, approximately 8 games over the course of a calendar year, are away to a host club. And a majority of those clubs are going to be in the Denver metro area. Being completely transparent, in my 19 years of doing this now, I have been to Grand Junction about 3 times, Pueblo 2 or 3 times, and Laramie twice, I believe. So that's roughly, 8 or 9 really big trips in 20 years outside of tournaments. And those are all participants in the CSA leagues. However, you have to A, have that team in your division, and B, they have to be drawn as the host club. So again, not common practice to visit those clubs, but it is a reality. At the older age groups, we begin to look at travel tournaments. Excluding regional or national championships, we try and get 1 in an under 14 to begin preparation so the kids are ready and parents are ready, and we can start to get a cadence and kind of get it down to a science. On average, we try and do 2 from under 15 to under 19 for showcase events and to build a tournament resume. Tournaments are a great way to experience team bonding, experience a new environment, build lasting friends and lasting memories. There is plenty of competition within the state of Colorado at the younger ages. But at the older ages, it's a really neat experience. I have seen players who otherwise wouldn't have ever seen the ocean, at least not, they hadn't seen the ocean previously in their lives. It was really cool to just experience that. We get the kids together. When we come back from these events, the kids are talking about the event itself, how much fun they had, their adventure, and it just kind of bonds them all together. So there's a lot of intrinsic value to these events outside of just soccer and competition as well. And you might say to yourself, that sounds great, but isn't the advanced program expensive? Well, competitive soccer is more expensive. There's no question about that. But there's a lot of things that are included. You have rented fields, extra equipment, more and better referees. And of course, we have the paid coaches. We also put far more admin support in with that just to make sure that everything is on the up and up. We have more checks and balances that we have to accomplish with the state of Colorado. So there's a lot more that goes into it. So how much is it? Well, the first team is around $1,700 for an entire year. And while that may sound expensive, we need to put it into context. If we play and train 6 hours a week, it comes out to be roughly $8.85 an hour. And I ask, where else can you entertain your kids for less than $10 an hour while they are receiving professional instruction, life lessons, and while they're having fun do it? Also, it's more affordable than music lessons for those of you guys who've looked into that. The other thing that we hear about is that it's just not fun, a lack of fun. Well, I disagree wholeheartedly. This is something that I've done my entire life, and I absolutely love it. And I want the kids to love it as well. But soccer is inherently fun. I'm not sure how this one is perpetuated, because I know that the kids I've worked with over the last however many years have had an absolute blast. And the number one question that people ask every player is, did you win? That happens at both the rec program and the competitive program. With both programs and the amount of education we do, we've tried to change that question to what did you learn, or did you play hard, or followed up with did you have fun? But we still do play to win. And regardless of level, people want to win, and winning is more fun than losing. But again, we provide as much perspective as possible. Something that also impacts this is sideline behavior. And our club has one of the absolute best reputations in the state. The culture, the code of conduct, the setting of expectations. These things help to put things into perspective. And we try and avoid the quote unquote cutthroat nature of competitive sport. Our coaches are trained and expected to help the players and parents take the same journey. And this comes back to purpose, lasting friends, and lasting memories. And while we do experience struggle, nobody's journey is linear. So the last one is the greatest element of fear that parents express. My kid is not ready. And if we waited until we were ready, we'll be waiting the rest of our lives. Nobody is ever ready. The nature of the program and sport in general is such that there is always something more to work toward. You'd be surprised how many parents believe their player is not ready when we as soccer professionals look at them and say they very much are. And as we mentioned earlier, attempting to enter late has more barriers to entry, and players will more often than not be further behind, even less ready. The entrance ages under 11 to competitive soccer are nothing to be feared. The predominant theme is how to train. We do our best to make sure that players become ready. And ultimately, you can simply have your player give it a shot, and we can have an honest conversation about it. If it's not their thing, they can always keep playing in one of our other programs. In the past 3 years, we have sent almost 20 female players to the collegiate level. More than half of them weren't ready when they were under 11. But less than a year in, they were sold out for soccer. And now we have parents who miss it and want to come back and keep watching other kids continue to play. Some people knew immediately that this was the path they wanted to take. Some folks weren't sure until we discussed their fears, and some others might still not be sure. But there's a lot of ways that you can get into the program. The first one is a formal tryout. Again, the link will be below. Using the form that is linked below to do an informal tryout during season. So this is for players who are currently under 9s, currently under 10s, currently under 11s, and above. And maybe you missed a kick around or you missed a tryout window and you want to come give it the old college try. Simply fill out the link below and we'll schedule something to have you come out. We do the kick arounds at the under 9, under 10 age groups, and we're hoping to do them numerous times throughout the course of the spring. And then ultimately, you can just always reach out to any member of our team and we'll get you squared away. And maybe you have further questions. Feel free to ask. But I hope that a lot of this has put some of the fear aside, and I hope that you're willing to at least consider it. Ultimately, what I want is everyone to consider competitive soccer, because ultimately soccer is a game for everyone. And we think that our competitive program is the best opportunity to ensure that players love the game and continue to play it. Thank you all so much for your time, and go green.